Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 251, After Everything, Are We Weaker? Third Person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. Minato was now alone against the two Uchihas while they also seemed surprised by it, staring at Minato in a strange way. The feeling of their familiar presences. And the way they refer to me, it's as if they know me, there's no doubt about who they really are. The Sharingans. No, now they're Mangekyo Sharingans. One specializes in Amaterasu and the other in Genjutsu. They must have more ocular powers. Several thoughts began crossing Minato's mind, analyzing the situation and the best way to deal with these enemies. You're certainly still arrogant, but given your fame, that shouldn't be a surprise, one of them said. Guren Uchiha and Akame Uchiha. Minato murmured, catching the two boys off guard once again. He really figured out it's us. Guren murmured. Yes. Minato said, still maintaining his serious gaze behind his mask. The place fell silent for a moment. Who were Akame and Guren if not his former classmates from the Ninja Academy? While there were only 3 Uchihas in that elite class, including Makoto, who was the most powerful and talented in their final year. Akame had become a standout in the first year, revealing a Sharingan at just 6 years old, and he had become the favorite when that happened in the middle of his fight against Minato in the final competition of the first year. However, Minato had the haki and managed to surpass the Uchiha's Kekkei Genkai, showing everyone that the number 1 rookie was Minato Namikaze. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, one of them burst out laughing. As expected, Minato. I am Akame. He said after laughing, while removing his cloak, revealing his face with a smiling look, showing both Sharingans and a scar across his face, some memory of war or something else, as Minato could tell. Guren also removed his cloak, revealing his face to Minato, with some scars as well. The two Mangekyo Sharingans were glowing crimson, with Minato keeping a close eye on the chakra in their eyes to stay alert for any attack from the dojutsu before it could be unleashed, whether through Genjutsu or Amaterasu as they had previously demonstrated. What happened to you two? Minato asked, narrowing his eyes. Although he already knew exactly what had happened, he didn't want to simply guess, as that would complicate his plans involving Madara and the Zetsus now after him. We met someone we never imagined we'd encounter. Guren answered with a serious tone. A person. Is this related to the disappearance of over 100 ninjas, most of them Uchihas? Minato asked, equally serious. We're not going to say anything else. Akame interrupted whatever Guren was about to say. Let's just finish him off already, Guren, he said before pausing again and continuing. Understand this, Minato. We are no longer those boys left behind in the shadow of everything you did and excelled in. We've gained new powers. Powers we can control to reach new heights, something you've never seen before, and now we're going to prove that we've surpassed you. He said. But he couldn't be more wrong. Minato knew everything he knew about Madara, the white Zetsus, even the black Zetsu. He knew very well how a large part of the Sharingan worked. Perhaps more than these two did, only possibly surpassed by Madara himself. After all, he doubted anyone knew more about the eyes than the one who had reached their highest level. Alright then. Minato simply said that and took the initiative, surprising the two Uchihas. Because in the next moment, he created 2 shadow clones, one on each side, both performing a series of hand signs at high speed, so fast that even their evolved Sharingans had some difficulty keeping up. This. Prepare yourself, he's going to attack. Minato finished his jutsus, and each clone released an element, with the original unleashing the Uchiha technique, using the horse seal. Fire style, Great Annihilation. The one in the middle expelled fire that exploded from his mouth. One of the side clones used Tiger Ox Dog Rabbit Snake. Wind style, Great Destruction. The clone created a great gust of wind in front of him, which merged with the fire and intensified it. The last clone used Tiger Snake Dragon. Lightning Style, Thundering Wave. This was an original jutsu of Minato, using the fire element style, where he released lightning by blowing it from his mouth like a shockwave advancing forward. The jutsu exploded quickly, fire reinforced by wind and surrounded by lightning, like a tri-elemental tsunami. This was his long-range jutsu rushing toward the two Uchihas with great force. Is that an S-class jutsu? Both were surprised by the destruction coming toward them. We can't dodge that. One of them concluded as the explosion devastated the entire forest as it advanced. Minato was still there, spitting out the three elements, knowing that it wasn't enough to stop them, as they used other powers in the next moment. How did Gurren come out unscathed from my kick when he hit the ground? He used the Susanoo. Minato concluded while the echo of the explosion and devastation happened all in front of him, until Minato finally stopped. In the middle of the destruction, burning chakra energy could be seen glowing as bones appeared into view. They had activated the Susanoo. Minato remained silent. In the next moment, Gurren tried to put him in a genjutsu, while he quickly diverted his gaze, realizing it would be dangerous to fight that way. Minato then pulled a band from his pocket and quickly tied it over his eyes, having to jump away from where he stood as the Amaterasu appeared right after, trying to hit him. He appeared on the other side while protecting his eyes. After all, he could handle many genjutsu, but here he was dealing with a Mangekyo Sharingan, and he didn't know exactly how powerful it was to be sure he could counter it. He thinks he can beat us with that blindfold? Akame sounded offended, looking strangely at Minato, while he decided to advance, with the Susanoo still activated. Seeing this, Gurren quickly performed a series of hand signs, firing flames at Minato while he vanished, appearing on the other side closer to him, advancing against the Susanoo. Minato appeared behind a surprised Gurren, transforming his arm with haki before striking his back with full force. A crack loud enough to surprise Gurren, throwing him off balance as he felt the bones of the Susanoo's ribcage cracking and breaking. How? Akame was shocked. After all, nothing should be able to penetrate their new powers, as he saw Gurren being hurled with the Susanoo several meters away, his body breaking. In the next moment, Akame's Susanoo began to grow even more, its arms extending as swords began to form in its hands and advanced toward Minato, who vanished to another kunai that hadn't been destroyed by the previous attack. Minato looked at the explosion created by the destroyed Susanoo that he had sent flying and advanced there before Akame could help him. Akame was surprised and tried quickly to reach his companion, but Minato had already appeared above him with both arms coated in haki, while Gurren felt the pressure of his bones breaking even further from Minato's punch, burying him even deeper. What? He couldn't be more surprised as he felt his defense start to crack with the haki-infused punches, Minato increasing their number with his speed, and they began to break through. Gurren! Akame shouted as he launched his Susanoo, which shattered the ground further, now filled with dust. An explosion followed, and Akame was shocked to see that Minato and Gurren were no longer there. Only Gurren's Susanoo remained, slowly dissipating. Ah! A scream came from the side as Akame turned in shock to see Gurren being seized by Minato. I can't let you keep those eyes, Minato said, while Akame exclaimed as he saw Gurren's eyes being torn out after Minato grabbed him and moved to the other side, having finally broken through the Susanoo's defense after over 30 haki-enhanced punches to reach the user within. You bastard! Akame shouted, activating his eye further. His Susanoo began to form a head, muscles, and skin as a cloak started enveloping it, reaching the most powerful phase for those who hadn't yet obtained the Eternal Eye. The swords began to form lines of Amaterasu, very similar to what Sasuke used to do with his arrows. Ah! Gurren was breathing heavily, his eyes absent from their sockets. He tried to escape Minato's grip with his enhanced strength, but the Uchiha couldn't see anything or break free, while Minato, focused on the new Susanoo, slapped Gurren unconscious. Minato simply tossed him aside, while carefully holding the two eyes in his hands. He began to sense multiple lifeforms approaching from underground. Zetsus were clearly coming to retrieve them. After all, they seemed very important to Madara. In the next moment, Minato vanished, just as the Amaterasu blade struck where he had stood. He had simply disappeared. You don't seem as powerful as you claimed. Minato said, still with his body completely intact. Not even his mask was very dirty, while Akame looked like he was beginning to tire. His eye had been bleeding since the start of the fight. After all, he hadn't stopped using Amaterasu. But Minato had to admit, Madara had done something to them. They shouldn't have gone this long without being harmed by their own eyes. Shut up! Akame seemed extremely irritated, and even more frustrated. After gaining all that power, Minato could still handle them? Even after they had received training and knowledge from the legendary Uchiha Madara? Akame and Gurren had been doing countless missions for Madara since they were taken by him. They had to prove their worth, and when their eyes were activated, no one could stand against them. They killed anyone they encountered. Finding Minato here after all these years felt like their final chance to prove that after being left behind by him and the girls who always walked with him, they were now the strongest. But now, Akame began to doubt that. His Susanoo continued advancing toward Minato wherever he appeared, but the blonde would always vanish from the spot and reappear elsewhere using his jutsu. No matter how powerful his Susanoo or even his Amaterasu was, if it didn't reach its target, it was useless. Minato was simply dodging. When most of the kunai were destroyed, he began spreading more of them around, and he didn't even advance using his haki anymore, knowing Akame could coat his entire Susanoo in Amaterasu, which could be dangerous. So the best strategy was to wait for his eyes to finally begin to go blind. This went on for a while, as Minato just kept dodging the attacks and Akame hunted him like a rat, but without success. Finally, his Susanoo gave in at that moment. His vision began to blur, while the Susanoo started to lose its structure, and he fell to his knees, clutching his hands over his eyes as everything began to turn hazy. Looks like it's over, Minato said as he walked toward where Akame was, the last remnants of the Susanoo's chakra fading away, leaving him there, vulnerable. Akame looked at him dazed, only able to see Minato's distorted figure approaching, while Gurren lay unconscious somewhere nearby, without his eyes. Chapter 252. Plans for the EMS. Third-person POV. Limits of Fire Country, Year 42. At the moment Minato was about to advance toward Akame, he felt something coming from all directions. He was immediately surrounded by creatures emerging from underground. This made him react quickly as he dashed forward at full speed. He stopped, picking up a fallen kunai, while beings began to sprout from the ground. Nothing less than dozens of white zetsus began to emerge around the area. But Minato was faster, darting like lightning before the zetsus could even react. However, he noticed something different in the air he had just passed through, as some things quickly latched onto his body. He remembered the damned ability that those cursed white zetsus possessed, as he began to feel small fungi appearing all over his body with them activating that spore technique. He was about to reach Akame at that moment, while the boy stood there terrified, watching Minato approach him, unable to move, afraid Minato would do the same thing he had done to Gurren. But at the same time, Minato's entire body was increasingly covered in white bubbles, with the white zetsu draining his chakra due to the spores in the air and multiplying. Minato's vision was quickly obscured, and then his body suddenly glowed, eliminating all the strange spores spreading across his body at once, burning them away with light, completely destroying them from all sides. Still, he wiped himself clean and quickly moved forward, grabbing Akame by the neck the next moment, as the boy drooled. "Got you," Minato said before sensing something strange, and Akame smiled the next moment with a very strange smile. At the same time, his body began to change. He transformed into Zetsu the very next moment. This caught Minato by surprise. "Tricked you," the white Zetsu said, laughing, as Minato crushed his neck, dropping him dead without another word. He quickly tried to sense Akame, since the white Zetsu had swapped places with him at the exact moment Minato lost his vision for a second, doing it swiftly, while also deceiving him. Because the Zetsus could copy chakra, and he did so without even Minato's haki detecting it, as Zetsu was still quite slippery at his current level. The presence of the Zetsus was in multiple places at once. And more of them were still there, watching from beneath the ground, while others who had appeared earlier began to advance toward him immediately. "He has the eyes. We must recover them," they said all at once. All they needed now was to retrieve the eye still in Minato's hands. After all, it was a Mangekyo Sharingan and they knew how important it was. Minato, now surrounded by more than 30 white bodies running toward him, disappeared the next moment. His kunai were still scattered all over the battlefield, except in the devastated areas, as he reappeared in the middle of the enemies, starting to kill them one by one, throwing kunai to the corners where none remained, after they had been destroyed in battle, and began eliminating each of them in a massacre of 30 Zetsus, dying in less than 1 minute. He stopped once they were all dead, but at the same time, more Zetsus began to appear, and another 30 stood before him. Minato now understood his situation well, knowing he could no longer reach Akame. At the same time, he knew Gurren had already disappeared from his haki as well. Even a seal he had placed on the body had been removed, which surprised him a bit that Zetsu had managed to do that. They're not idiots. They probably have plenty of information about me, and clearly Madara knows how to handle most of it, Minato thought, as he observed the situation. All they wanted now were the eyes he carried. And they would do anything to get them. You want these eyes, he said, pointing at them, as the smiles on their lips began to fade. At that moment, they knew Minato was about to do something. Minato threw them into the air, but the next moment, before his right hand shone with lightning, he struck, hitting the eyes mid-air. No! The white Zetsus shouted at that action, while all that remained of the lightning were ashes falling to the ground, with Minato destroying the Mangekyo Sharingan right in front of them. He quickly rushed at them, killing them all with ease, while aiming to capture at least one of the bodies. And even though they knew his abilities and the information gathered during the war, it was useless against his speed and his ability to move, with kunai scattered all around the area. Minato massacred the group in the next minute just like the first group, as the last one fell. He could still feel the presences underground, but none of them rose again. They only watched. He could sense their frustration, they certainly wouldn't bring good news to Madara. He went to retrieve one of the 60 fallen bodies, but as he got closer, they began to melt, destroying their matter and turning into vapor. In the end, the Zetsus began to retreat, leaving Minato alone, taking Akame and Gurren Uchiha with them, as Minato could no longer sense their presence there. He simply sighed. At least the Zetsus were gone. He went to the body of the teammate who had been killed by Gurren at the start of the battle after falling into his genjutsu. He had kept his eye secretly on that body the whole time after the Zetsus appeared, hoping they wouldn't steal it. It was a bit risky, but in the end, it had to be that way, and the Zetsus didn't even care about the body of a fallen Konoha ninja. Minato approached it before stopping and scanning all the surroundings, still fully focused with his sensory ability, rigorously watching for any presence, but there was nothing else. He was safe. As expected, since there was no reason for them to spy on him anymore after he destroyed the eyes. He opened the eyes of the dead teammate, whose eyelids had been closed, and as soon as he did, they revealed 2 Sharingans in their evolved Mangekyo form. Obviously, Minato had swapped the eyes without anyone noticing amidst the chaos while he kept fighting Akame, to deceive them while he held the eyes in his hands in plain sight. He always kept an eye on the body to make sure it wouldn't be harmed. He ended up bluffing by using fake eyes to fool the white Zetsus. Which worked, after all, they weren't very smart. But of course, the 2 eyes that were destroyed were real, and the Zetsus would clearly report that to Madara, thinking they were the Sharingans, while Minato had switched those eyes with ordinary ones from his teammate, placing the Sharingans in the corpse and deceiving his enemies. He removed the 2 eyes from the eye sockets and placed them in a jar with liquid to preserve anything. Something he always carried with him for his missions, not that he expected to get his hands on 2 Mangekyo Sharingans, but clearly it served to seal them and store them inside his scrolls. He had no interest in implanting those eyes in himself after all, it made no sense for him to have Sharingans that would hinder more than help, especially since he already had abilities with greater potential. But certainly, there was someone who needed an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Minato could feel Makoto's frustration in recent weeks. She was falling behind. Even Hanabi, who wasn't training Sage Mode like Suna, was growing stronger thanks to her new summoning contract. Even with the help of her father, the leader of the Uchiha clan, she was struggling to evolve, especially since she couldn't use her eyes freely within the village. But with these eyes, now in his possession, they would suit her perfectly once she was ready to receive them. The possibility of having an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and at the same time having an ally by his side with those legendary eyes, would provide a massive power boost, comparable even to a Biju. But Minato set that aside. He simply filled his mouth with fire and unleashed it upon the body of his former teammate. After all, he needed to destroy any evidence that he had taken a pair of Uchiha eyes, reducing the body to ashes before leaving. He moved directly toward a cave in the Land of Fire where he had sent all 10 members of his team. Guren's genjutsu had been so powerful that not even Minato could awaken them, and only after 2 hours did their chakra return to normal. Questions and doubts came quickly, while Minato explained that they had all been placed under a genjutsu, and he had been the only one to fight the Uchihas until they managed to flee, with Minato claiming he had struggled to face those eyes, which everyone could understand. In the end, they returned to the battlefield, insisting they needed to investigate, since Danzo would clearly need that information, but Minato kept the truth to himself, saying nothing. Either way, he left them and went to Konoha to report to the Hokage, returning 20 minutes later. "We're heading back to the village. This is an urgent mission, and we have to report to the Hokage," Minato informed the team, nodding, as some of them picked up the destroyed body of the teammate Minato had burned, now reduced to bones as the only somewhat intact part, with the rest reduced to ashes. Everyone nodded after scanning the battlefield, seeing nothing unusual, and Minato was right. Not even a trace of the Zetsus could be found. In the end, they left the area and headed back to Konoha, with Minato passing at least 15 standard ninja teams on the way there, further reinforcing the region, 2 of them being the Shika Inocho team and the squad of Due and Nowaki. Minato teleported back to Konoha a moment later with his team, knowing the Hokage had requested his immediate return, but now, he needed to rest. Upon arriving in the village, they didn't waste time. Minato headed to the Hokage's office along with his team, once again delivering a more detailed report than the first regarding the situation. He explained how he had fought them under limited conditions and that, in the end, both Uchihas fled without mentioning anything about the white Zetsus, but what truly alarmed the 2 elders before them was Minato's description of their eyes. They possessed special abilities, such as black flames and genjutsu capable of incapacitating his entire team. Even Danzo was present, looking at Minato's words as a threat, and one could feel his intentions turning directly toward the Uchiha clan, filled with many questions. Obviously, Minato couldn't say much about Madara, since he was still hidden. Revealing that would only make him more suspicious, and he needed to keep a low profile, especially with so many eyes on him at this moment. Now was a good opportunity to act while those 2 focused on the Uchiha, expecting something to come from them, with 2 Uchihas apparently outside the clan. In any case, when the report was finished, they left the Hokage, and Minato's team also split up, spreading out across the village as they proceeded directly along their assigned routes. But regrouping at another point in the village, trying to deceive Minato, heading to the root base, where they would answer all kinds of questions Danzo would ask, gathering information the Hokage had not been able to obtain. Meanwhile, he was frustrated that only Minato had had the opportunity to fight the Uchihas in the end. Meanwhile, Minato returned home deep in thought. There weren't many missions that truly caught them by surprise, but this one had been different. It made Minato wonder when he would fight again, swearing that in the next confrontation, whoever he faced, he would kill them immediately. He would be even stronger than he was now, and wouldn't have to worry so much about Madara, or Black Zetsu. Chapter 253, It's time to begin the plans. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Things in Konoha were getting strange. Over the past few months, no one really knew what was going on for the most part. Even the Hokage didn't know what to think about it. People's eyes were uneasy, as if something very big was about to happen. The question was, what could be so big to create this feeling throughout the village? Even civilians, whose perceptions were far below those of ninjas, also had the sense that the village's atmosphere was getting heavy, maybe not as much as during the last war, but the feeling that the peace, which hadn't even lasted 2 years, was about to change. Minato headed to his apartment, where he found Makoto making afternoon coffee. "You finally arrived," she commented with a sweet tone, as Minato entered, taking off his mask and changing clothes before joining her. "Did something happen?" She couldn't help but notice Minato's expression, looking thoughtful. "Yes, our 2 former classmates, from your clan. We found them on the northwestern border, crossing into the land of waterfalls," Minato said in a serious tone. "Wait? Those 2 were presumed dead? How did they show up?" she asked, surprised. After all, although Makoto wasn't very informed about her clan and most of the ninjas who disappeared on the northern border, she and everyone else certainly knew they had died in the elite class war, with gossip always circulating from those who still kept in touch.
Exactly, and somehow, they showed up, both having the Mangekyo Sharingan. Minato said, making Makoto grimace. How is that possible? That's not something from the clan. She murmured, not understanding what that meant.
It didn't seem like an action from her father, like keeping two powerful ninjas outside Konoha's control, that didn't make sense to her.
Exactly.
They weren't acting on behalf of the Uchiha clan, but I doubt the Hokage will see it that way, now that they have this information.
That's why I omitted some things, with only me fighting them.
Minato said, checking if anyone was nearby before saying his last words.
The village already seems to despise the Uchihas, now they'll do everything to put a rope around their neck.
Was this the opportunity you said they needed to destroy the Uchihas? Makoto asked, as Minato had already warned that one day, in the future, if the village had a good excuse to destroy them, it would do exactly that. This will be a good excuse to increase the pressure on the clan.
But at the same time, I doubt the village will do anything radical, even if they want to. Minato said. The attack on the Uzumakis is about to happen.
And the village would be shooting itself in the foot if it encouraged internal conflict.
He explained. Makoto nodded, falling silent in thought before turning back to Minato. This is a good opportunity for you, isn't it? She suggested, and Minato nodded. Yes.
If the Uchihas are pushed against the wall in the coming months, it'll be a great opportunity to seek an alliance with them against the village leadership. Minato said he could bring the Uchihas to his side despite the conflict between them. After all, they would be investigated and pressured by the village. Even more so considering the doubts and suspicions Tobirama's disciples naturally already had against them.
So they too would need allies.
Though Minato had to act quickly, as he had a better chance of doing so while Makoto's father was still the clan leader, rather than Fugaku Uchiha, since according to Makoto, her father was about to retire for good and become an elder.
But if they're not with the Uchiha clan, who are they with? Makoto asked, confused and intrigued.
I already know about that, but we should talk about it when the village is safer for us or outside of here.
Minato said as Makoto nodded. In any case, Minato continued eating with his companion. Suna came back. She wanted to talk to you since yesterday. She commented, and Minato nodded.
I felt her as soon as I entered the village, she definitely got stronger.
Minato could feel it. Yes.
Makoto said, at the same time clenching her fist, looking frustrated. That's what Minato knew was happening here, as she seemed to feel like she was falling behind the other companions.
Makoto. I have something for you, but I can't give it to you now. Something that will make you stronger. Minato said, while she looked a little confused but nodded, trusting what Minato was saying.
I also need you to wear down your Mangekyo a bit more, but we'll do that outside the village. After all, if those elders find out you have those eyes, they'll do everything they can to kill you.
Minato said in a serious tone.
She was initially confused by Minato asking her to use her Mangekyo, which could make her blind, but she trusted him.
I'm going to see Tsuna. Shall we? He invited her, and she nodded.
They headed to the Senju clan right after, going straight to Kushina's house, where Tsuna was with the redhead. The door opened the next moment, with them also sensing their presence, and Tsuna smiled upon seeing Minato.
Minato! You're finally here. She said. Hello. You're finally back.
Minato replied, receiving a cheerful hug from the blonde before entering and then hugging Kushina, since he had been away from the village for a few days after the mission to patrol the border. So, tell me about the training.
Minato said as they sat at the table. I'm a lot stronger now, even though I still can't control my power. Kushina said you mastered Sage Mode months ago. She said, looking at him with admiration. You could say that.
I went to Mount _________ and trained with the sages. It was easy at first, but I had to spend weeks getting used to the energy.
Minato explained. Easy at first? Weeks? Suna raised her voice with an incredulous expression upon hearing that from Minato. Do you have any idea how long it took me just to get through the beginning? And I spent months to pass the first part. Damn it, Minato, you're really something else. She muttered with a pout while Kushina and Makoto remained silent. I was lucky to have some prior experience with my second summoning contract, Minato said. Kushina said the fish had turned into a dragon. That's really hard to believe. Suna commented, and the other girls agreed with her. I know, and I barely had the chance to see all of its abilities while I'm hiding it from everyone in Konoha. I was even going to try summoning it outside the country during these days off, but now it's time for me to train with Tsukumo, Minato said. He stayed there for a few more hours, staying for dinner, while Minato looked at Kushina after concealing the place for another serious conversation while she always activated her chains and barrier to talk about important matters, so nothing would reach the ears of the village leadership, while they still thought they just had a normal relationship, with Minato being engaged to all of them. I reached where the Kyuubi is, Kushina admitted, while Minato nodded, knowing very well what that meant. She's probably going to torment you, Minato said. If Kushina had found the place inside her subconscious where the bijou was, she could also take him there whenever she wanted, just like what happened with Naruto when he learned the toad summoning jutsu. Yes, Kushina murmured with some uncertainty. Don't worry, we'll deal with her, Kushina. Minato placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. You'll be able to handle her, there's no doubt. But you're also not alone. I told you once I'll have a talk with her first, Minato said, and he could feel a hostile, malevolent sensation aimed directly at him the moment he said that, while none of the other girls felt it, with Kushina nodding, despite her concern about Minato wanting to speak with the Kyuubi. Minato fell silent, looking at the Uzumaki's belly. The Kyuubi was clearly staring back at him, with a look that said she felt insulted by a human thinking he could simply talk to her. What she didn't know was what Minato already knew about her, and above all, maybe he should just have a conversation with her. Even if he wasn't Naruto, he might still be able to end the conflict through dialogue. Something that Minato honestly didn't find very logical. But still, he might surprise Kurama and speak of future events, and how she was needed as an ally, or else, would once again become part of the Ten Tails used to resurrect Kagaya. That sounds dangerous, Makoto commented, also looking worried. Don't worry about it. I have a way, but let's leave that talk for later, Minato said. Minato ended up staying with Makoto and Suna with Kushina, and they all slept there that night. The next day, Minato was on a battlefield, analyzing the sword in his hand. Tsukumo was near him, silently observing as Minato trained with him that day. Minato was somehow trying to infuse something into the sword, completely focused on the metal, as he attempted to reach a new level of haki, projecting it beyond his body into something external. First, his arm began to darken, creating a layer of armament haki as it turned pitch black. Then the haki began to spread from his forearms directly into the sword, and the blade began to react. The hilt of the sword turned black and started to spread toward the middle of the blade. Minato looked at it with satisfaction, trying to enhance the ability until it reached the end of the weapon, and finally, it began to expand after stopping at the midpoint. The entire sword was now black. Incredible, the sword is completely black, Tsukumo commented, watching Minato with interest. He had never really understood this ability that could even protect Minato's body from a sword attack, as he had already demonstrated to him. Minato had said he wanted to put the same ability into the sword, potentially amplifying its cutting power to a level many times greater. Tsukumo still didn't understand it and had never been one to ask too many questions about Minato's secrets. After all, if Minato wanted to share, he would. In any case, Minato looked toward the trees with the blackened sword and made a move that Tsukumo had taught, to send chakra into the blade. But Minato wouldn't use chakra this time, he would test his haki. He had already mastered the technique to the point of cutting a tree from 10 meters away. But now, he wanted to do it with haki, standing 10 meters from the dense forest ahead. In the next moment, he made the same move from the technique, and the sound of the sword echoed through the area. Tsukumo watched with interest and surprise at the shift in atmosphere.
Then he opened his eyes. The first tree began to rise, with a clean cut, separating from the lower part, while a second and third tree did the same. In the end, more than 10 trees were cut from a distance of 10 to 15 meters, lifting before falling. The sound of them crashing resonated through the area, branches smashing under their own weight and leaves flying everywhere.
That was amazing.
Minato commented before his sword returned to regular metal, losing control.
That really was incredible. I've never seen anything like it, and I didn't even feel chakra in the air. Do you have any idea how deadly this could be on a battlefield? Tsukumo said.
Maybe you. He stopped talking at that moment as Minato raised his hand.
His gaze was serious toward Tsukumo as he understood.
In the next moment, some ninjas passed by them, staring as they ran to another part of the village.
Umbu? Tsukumo murmured with narrowed eyes. They're from Root. Minato said, recognizing them easily. The elders are really on edge, huh? Tsukumo murmured.
Yes, for them to send a group just to spy on us, knowing we'd notice them, they're only pretending to pass through the area.
The village is getting tense. Minato explained and commented. Shall we gather tonight? Tsukumo asked in a serious tone, and Minato nodded.
Yes. We'll gather all the clans that might support our cause.
We'll have the first conversation tonight, Minato said as Tsukumo nodded. Minato was already putting his plans into motion in Konoha, reaching the edge of what the Uzumaki clan once was.
Chapter 254, The Uzumaki clan must be saved.
Third-person POV. Konoha, year 42.
The moon had reached its highest point in Konoha, while the village seemed quite serene that night, unaware that some schemes were being devised even far from the Hokage's ears and those of other members.
It's time, Minato commented as they were in a large room.
Yes, as I already spoke with everyone we could trust and the time they should be ready, they must be waiting right now.
Nawaki said beside Minato, as Minato nodded. Let's begin with this,
Minato announced and crossed both hands making a seal, and in the next moment, a group of people began to appear.
One by one, more than a dozen people in total, counting Minato and Nawaki.
Everyone looked surprised at that, while they held the kunai with Minato's Raijin seal in their hands, used to pull them to that place, while each one had received 2 tracking kunai so Minato could send them back to where they came from once they were done there.
The gaze continued as one stared at another. I hope you all know what you're doing,
one of them commented, while the others nodded slightly.
This was no joke. Those present were Nara clan, their leader, Shiran Nara, Osi, father of Shikaku, and even his son was there with him. Yamanaka clan, their leader, Inosho Yamanaka, Osi, father of Inoichi. Akimichi clan, their leader, Chasuke Akimichi, Osi, father of Choza. Hataki clan, their leader, Tsukumo Hataki. Aburame clan, their leader, Shurdan Aburame, OC. Inazuka clan, their leader, Ryoma Inazuka, OC. Kurama clan, their leader, Reiji Kurama, OC, and father of Mirage, former companion of Minato in the ANBU from the war until he left his team years later. And those who were already there. Senju clan, their leader, Nawaki Senju. Namikaze clan, their leader, Minato Namikaze. Although the latter was not officially a clan, everyone in the village considered the Namikaze family very powerful, especially when the village's hero, already with his immense strength and contributions to the village, was about to marry multiple wives from powerful clans, being the only one to do so since the village was founded. It was expected that Minato would have many children and his clan would explode in power if more of his children inherited his abilities. Shikaku appeared alongside his father, probably by the elder's choice to have his son analyze the situation and learn, while the others wanted to preserve their children. It was warned that this was risky. A member of the Inazuka clan said, as they looked at each other. Either way, I came here because of the call. I'm surprised to even see Tsukumo Hataki, even after his supposed reputation was tarnished and made him retire. Reiji Kurama murmured, seemingly mocking. Tsukumo kept his gaze neutral. Minato heard this and didn't like it. Tsukumo was a great ninja of the village. Just because he failed a mission of which you don't even know the real losses doesn't mean he stopped being a ninja who did everything he did during the war and before it. Please, don't mock his contributions to the village like the rest of the village is being manipulated to do. Minato spoke in a stern tone, while the ninja who had spoken looked at him with narrowed eyes. Tell me then, why are we here? What makes you think we should hide from the Hokage, having a secret meeting to the point of teleporting us here? Why hide this from the village leadership? The leader of the Kurama clan spoke again. I know I might be risking all of you by bringing you here, but unfortunately, the village has reached a point I can no longer ignore. And I want to ask your opinion on this, because I do not intend to let it happen. Minato said, while many narrowed their eyes at him, not knowing what was going on, only Nawaki and Tsukumo aware of the matter beforehand. What would that be, for you to call this meeting, and without some of the clans? The leader of the Nara clan said, noticing the absence of the two main clans of Konoha, the Hyuga and the Uchiha. The Uzumaki clan will be destroyed. Minato said, making everyone's eyes immediately widen at that. The Uzumaki were handed over as a gift to the other great villages, something to be sacrificed for peace, just like in the Second World War. They wanted something to weaken Konoha's power, which had grown greatly in the Second Ninja War. Minato said, while many raised their eyebrows, still not fully understanding why they were there, despite the shocking statement. Are you saying Konoha handed over the Uzumaki? Why would we do that? They gave us great support during the war, one of the clan leaders murmured, looking at Minato, visibly confused about where he was getting this from. Minato still kept a serious look. It's more complicated than that, which is why I'm so outraged. I managed to hear the entire conversation that took place at the Kage summit. I have abilities that allow me to hear conversations even within barriers, and even from a distance, as I was, still in Konoha's camp. So, I've been preparing ever since. He paused before continuing. At the peace meeting, they wanted us to hand over our most powerful ninjas, like me, Tsukumo, and the 3 Sannin, but the Hokage refused. However, he gave another option, to hand over an entire clan, the Uzumaki. It would be easier for the Hokage to do that, while the clan would be attacked by all the villages. And Konoha won't lift a finger to help them. Minato said. If that's true. Shikaku Nara murmured, looking at Minato, trying to grasp the truth of his words. They are beginning to act. Minato spoke again. After all, when I was with my old team in the ANBU, while your daughter was part of it, Reiji Kurama. He can confirm this. He first turned to the man and then back to everyone as he continued. I was leading on the eastern coast border of the Land of Fire, when we found a group of Sand ninjas meeting with Mist ninjas. They were gathering information about the Uzumaki. Don't you find it strange that no Uzumaki was invited to the Kage summit? When they should have been there? But Konohagakure didn't even call them, and there's a reason. After all, they're a form of sacrifice, being a clan outside the Land of Fire. Even though they're allies, Konoha can very well let them be destroyed, or am I wrong? Minato said to the leader of the Nara clan. It is possible. Shiran Nara nodded, understanding Minato's reasoning. You all are really believing this? That Konohagakure intends to hand over the Uzumaki, another clan leader murmured, looking at the situation with caution. He was skeptical of something like this based on words alone. When I passed the information to the Hokage's offices after reading the scrolls, they immediately told me not to share this information with anyone. However, I broke that rule by speaking about it here. But I already knew about the attack and how Konoha had handed them over since the Kage meeting. I won't stand still and watch an allied clan be destroyed. It doesn't matter if Hiruzen doesn't have strong ties like Hashirama and Mito did. We can't just forget Konoha's history if it's destroyed like this. I wouldn't want to spit on their graves by simply letting the village leadership make this decision. The place fell silent after Minato's words. He had some disagreements with Hashirama. After all, Hashirama had captured all the bijou in the name of peace and made all the villages enslave them, only for the wars to become even greater in size and destruction. But that wasn't the point. I heard you were transferred. Was it because of this? Someone asked Minato, and he nodded. Yes. Today I'm surrounded by a team made up of root members, under Danzo. A squad he's been building since the beginning of the Second World War. They act as hidden ANBU, doing very dirty work, and my team is only there to keep watch on me after what I discovered on the eastern coast. The Hokage even transferred me to missions on the opposite side of the country. Minato said. So this meeting is to carry out a coup d'état?
Another asked cautiously, as the atmosphere quickly grew tense among them at the thought that this might be an attempt to overthrow the Hokage.
I don't intend to carry out a coup d'état. Minato said, after all, there was no way to overthrow the Hokage now. But I know his actions will lead to nothing. We will lose an ally and friends who fought by our side, just to satisfy the petty desire of some old men from other villages, who lost to Konoha when all of them were fighting against us.
And the Hokage is accepting that. Minato said, pausing and looking at each of them before continuing. I want to propose that we all put pressure on the Hokage for this. When the time comes, and you see with your own eyes that the village will do nothing to protect them, even with several Uzumaki at our gates asking for help, I'm not asking us to fight against Konoha. I want us to reaffirm our ideal. The will of fire has always been about protecting our family, comrades, friends, and especially the next generation, so that Konoha may always flourish in peace. However, we cannot build that peace through the sacrifice of comrades, a clan that fought by our side, bled and sacrificed in the Second War. Are we going to destroy the history of Konoha, from its very beginning until now, for the sake of a false peace? He paused again, as everyone continued to absorb his words. War will come either way. There's no such thing as a world of complete peace, there will always be conflict. But I will not stand by and watch comrades be massacred without being able to do anything. I'd rather run from Konoha and fight alongside them than simply stand still and wear a forehead protector with no meaning. That would be throwing all my values and the will of fire in the trash. He finished, while the room fell into complete silence, with only the flames of the torches lighting the space. They were in an area beneath the Senju property, sealed with the best barriers and seals, a place created by Mito herself, built during the time when she and others would talk about important matters for the village while Hashirama was still Hokage. I believe in Minato and everything he said. Nawaki stepped beside Minato as he spoke to the representative of the Senju clan. He lifted his head, staring at the other clan leaders of Konoha who were present. We've started doing missions in the west, and I felt the forces are weakening vigilance on the western coast. Something is happening there, and I believe in Minato's words, he said. I trust Minato as well. Sakumo spoke for the first time. If Konoha is planning this, we can't stand idly by, he said. Why should we believe you? What if you're trying to seize power? Sakumo could very well take over, or even Minato, one of them said with suspicion. Obviously, all kinds of questions were bound to arise after such a revelation. How could I want the position if my reputation is already ruined? You all know I'm not exactly beloved in the village. Sakumo said in a calm tone, though tinged with anger. Sakumo is also proof of how wrong our village leadership is. I don't want to take the Hokage's place, I just want to uphold Konoha's rights and values through our actions. Sakumo was said to have caused great harm to Konoha by saving his comrades, but I believe he did the right thing. We should be more concerned about our friends, brothers, and fellow villagers before anything else. What they did to Sakumo was surely a blow to any chance he had of becoming the next Hokage. Hiruzen is getting old, while Sakumo represents the strength to be the ideal next Hokage. But there are people in the village's leadership who don't want that, maybe even the Hokage himself. I can't say for sure, but Danzo certainly wants to become Hokage. And he sees an opportunity for that if Sakumo no longer has his strength and reputation. Either way, I'll never condemn him as the village did. To me, he's a precious comrade. I won't go on much further about this, but I want you all to observe the village over the coming months. When the attack happens, watch how they react. Then we'll return here. At that moment, we'll decide. Not to take the Hokage's place, but to pressure them to help the Uzumaki. That's all I ask. And I'm not committing any treason here, he said. They looked at each other for a moment. Well, it's only fair to observe how the village reacts to a possible attack on the Uzumaki by the other villages, if it really happens as Minato Namikaze is saying. We have nothing to lose by doing that, the leader of the Nara clan said, and the others nodded, finding Minato's words reasonable.
In any case, I'll send you all back to your clans.
When the time comes, we'll make contact and truly decide what to do. Are we clear? He asked, as the others nodded.
Good luck, he said, and in the next moment, he made a seal, and everyone vanished, leaving only Minato and Nawaki in the now empty place once again. You don't think they'll report us? Nawaki asked cautiously. Even if they do, we're not trying to overthrow the village leadership.
So, they can't accuse us of anything beyond me just breaking an S-rank mission order by revealing something the Hokage asked to keep secret.
Minato shrugged. Either way, none of them truly showed any negative intent.
Let's see what they decide, but I believe until then, they'll stay quiet.
And when it happens, we'll know their answer, Minato said, and Nawaki nodded.
This was the first step in trying to stop Konoha from withholding aid to the Uzumaki when they were attacked and, somehow, make the village help them.
Until then, he wouldn't need to flee.
But if it came to that, he had a plan B.
Chapter 255, The Movement of Shadows in Konoha. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42.
Time went by and, soon, days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The village's atmosphere continued to flow with the same gloomy tone, but no one knew exactly what that meant, even as time passed.
But some things became quite visible.
The Uchiha clan began to receive various sanctions from the village, taxes started to increase on the clan, while missions to investigate them were being conducted all the time.
The Uchihas weren't idiots.
They noticed the village's advance on their affairs, and how it seemed the village was spying on them.
Many questions began to be raised.
Even the Uchihas began to act more hostile while patrolling the village, causing people to feel even more negative emotions toward them, much more than they already had before, turning it into a massive snowball. At the same time, Minato, being an official student of Tsukumo Hatake, quickly became public knowledge, while people were surprised to learn that Minato Namikaze, who was still referred to as a war hero, had become a swordsman in the Hatake style, something not even his son seemed willing to learn after the fallout with his father.
The gossip began among ninjas and civilians, since Minato's reputation hadn't been destroyed.
Although he knew that, on his missions, they were becoming slightly more sensitive to any mistakes, seeming like the elders were also waiting for the perfect opportunity for him to slip up so they could try to bring him down publicly like they did with Tsukumo. Minato was quite clever regarding any movement of his team, while Hiruzen and Danzo assumed he didn't know they had infiltrated people there to try to monitor or act against him. What they expected was that Minato wouldn't think twice about abandoning members like those from Root, as had already happened before. Since they were just Danzo's dogs, he didn't mind seeing them die, pretending he tried to save them or even preferring to choose the mission over saving them, something similar to what happened with Tsukumo, but Minato didn't care about seeing them die in front of him. Members had already died in his team, at least 3 from Root, including one who was killed by one of the Uchihas. Hiruzen even commented that he was surprised by the fatality rate occurring in his team, considering that Minato had been quite exemplary managing Camp 12 during the end of the war, with 0 deaths. Minato simply said it happened and that he felt sorry for the dead ninjas. He ended that subject while Hiruzen continued assigning him missions. Today, in particular, he had a mission. He had to investigate the surroundings of the Uchiha clan, trying to find any resemblance linking the 2 Uchihas he faced at the border of the Land of Waterfalls, trying to connect them so that, if they were traitors, they could be identified before Danzo had the power to decide something drastic.
The mission was simple. They stayed for a week, every night, observing entries and exits, from afar using binoculars.
The Uchihas were already suspicious, as they always looked around, with some even activating their Sharingan to search for nearby chakra. Meanwhile, Minato and his team remained at a distance. As Minato's team behaved fluidly, he didn't mind being detected, with his haki alerting him if they were seen, but not all ambush teams were so efficient since the Uchihas wouldn't be so suspicious if they hadn't already noticed or caught someone from the village spying on them. In the end, they were sent back to the western border in search of the Uchiha ninjas and even to carry out missions inside the Land of Waterfalls, looking for any trace, while he could feel the white Zetsus watching them from underground, especially him already identifying him, furious that he had ended up with two Mangekyo Sharingans.
But Minato didn't care.
If they came out seeking revenge, it would be an opportunity for Minato to destroy the entire team himself. He finished the mission a week later, and when he returned to Konoha, he went to the hidden area of the Senju clan, with Nawaki by his side again, while a figure appeared holding his kunai. It was Mazu Uchiha, who looked at the two in front of him with narrowed eyes.
Makoto told me you have answers. About why the village is acting strange and investigating us, pressuring my clan. Mazu said, looking at Minato.
Yes. I called you here because you've also become a target of part of the village leadership, Minato said, finding that the perfect moment to bring the Uchihas in, despite their last confrontation not having made him very liked among them.
Even so, Mazu remained cautious. What do you mean? Why are they acting like this? Mazu asked.
He didn't understand the village's shift and got no answers even when confronting the Hokage directly in one of their meetings. I found two Uchihas who were supposed to be dead at the western border. Minato began to explain the situation, while Mazu raised an eyebrow, stunned.
Mangekyo Sharingan?
They had those eyes, being two Uchihas who were supposed to be dead or missing.
Mazu couldn't be more surprised by that. Exactly.
The village suspects you're planning something, and they believe you have some connection with those two Uchihas, Minato said, omitting that he had taken one of the pairs of Mangekyo Sharingan. Then he continued. Either way, you should know the second Hokage never looked kindly upon your clan. That carried over to his students, who now lead the village.
Naturally, things wouldn't be good for the Uchihas.
At the first opportunity they get, they'll back you into a corner, Minato said, while Mazu seemed thoughtful, before looking at him with a serious glint in his eyes.
Why are you telling me this? What do you want?
You know you're not someone liked by our clan, he said.
No, I'm not, Minato said. And I don't regret that, if you ask me.
Either way, we have a common enemy, and we have to stop the village leadership before they start committing atrocities. Minato began to expose the whole situation of the Uzumaki to the leader of the Uchiha clan, who listened attentively, also surprised by it. When the time comes, I want the support of many clans to pressure the Hokage about aiding our allies. That will give us a chance to weaken the elders. Because the way they're treating your clan is unfair, and I'm sure those two Uchihas have nothing to do with you, he said.
You want to overthrow the Hokage? Mazu asked, in a low voice. Minato shook his head.
There's no way to do that now, but it's possible to apply pressure.
However, the worst enemy you could have is Danzu.
Him, yes, we can take down once and for all, he said in a serious tone.
Mazu nodded, saying he would think about it, as he returned to the clan after Minato teleported him again.
Well, that's it for now. Let's call our next guest, Minato said, while Nawaki nodded. She must be furious after waiting this long, he muttered, as Minato formed hand seals to bring in the next person. Tsunade appeared with a not-so-friendly look, placing her hand on her hip and glaring at Nawaki and Minato.
You made me wait an hour. Even Shizen thinks I'm going crazy.
She saw me awake with a kunai in my hand in the middle of the room, she said, visibly dissatisfied.
Well, anyway, Tsunade, let's start the plan, Minato said, while Nawaki swallowed hard.
So, you've gathered all the allies, she asked, but Minato shook his head.
I never said I'd gather them. I only said I'd make everyone see what's happening in the village.
Now, whether they'll help us or not is another story.
Anyway, we have almost all the major clans except the Hyuga.
Aware of the situation, and none of them have reported us to the elders, which makes me think they're willing to take our side, Minato explained.
Why weren't the Hyuga called? Well, you know about the incidents.
Minato put most of their elders in the hospital, so I don't think it would be a good idea to approach them right now, Nawaki replied for Minato. Whatever, let's begin the transplant of Nawaki's arm, she said, staring at them.
Yes. Soon, everything will be quite chaotic.
So it's good that we're at full strength, Minato said, while Nawaki nodded. His arm had been ready for months.
Tsunade had achieved what many hadn't even tried, like Danzu.
He was getting desperate, not being able to replicate Mokutan to make an arm for himself, even while having Nawaki's original arm.
Besides that, I need to ask for something you both won't like.
But it'll be necessary to use as proof against Danzu. You want justice for what he's done, and this will help. Minato spoke and began to explain what he intended, with neither of them liking the idea due to what he was suggesting. In the following days, Minato left on his missions, and Nawaki had also departed. Tsunade went to visit her mother outside the village, while the Senju clan was left only with Kushina Namikaze, surrounded by her ANBU teams. And everything seemed normal on a certain night, until, suddenly, a battle broke out within the clan, with explosions and the sounds of fighting making all the ANBU guarding Kushina rush to the scene. They found Hashirama's grave half open and 2 fallen ninjas on the ground, wearing cloaks, with exploded paper bombs and many kunai scattered on the floor.
"What is this?" one of them murmured. "Quick, we must inform the Hokage." With that, someone went to alert the Hokage. Hiruzen immediately appeared at the location, with Kushina on the balcony of her house, watching the commotion.
The Hokage simply ordered them to take the bodies of the 2 dead ninjas. They were taken to a secret area of the village, where no one else saw them, with the Hokage stating he would investigate, placing the bodies under the care of very trusted individuals while Hiruzen analyzed them, noticing perfect cuts on their necks. After a brief kunai fight, their opponents had been extremely fast. He wondered who had done that. It was then that Danzu appeared in the hallway, approaching him, with Hiruzen giving him an unfriendly look.
"Explain yourself now,"
Hiruzen ordered in the next moment, as Danzu came near him. Defiling the first Hokage's grave was beyond the things Hiruzen imagined Danzu capable of.
"I'm doing this for research.
The arm I took during the war wasn't enough to access the real source of Mokutan.
Don't you understand this is the only way to create a powerful force using the power of the first Hokage," he said, already knowing Hiruzen was about to punish him. And the arm he was referring to was Nawaki's own, which made everything even more serious, but Hiruzen seemed to have allowed it. "Danzu, this has gone too far.
I won't allow you to keep carrying out missions as route pleases.
I want reports now on all your activities."
"You're lucky we caught this before anyone else did, because if this went public, it would be a scandal," Hiruzen said, clearly furious. Danzu said nothing, despite the rage visible in the gleam of his eyes, as his gaze returned to the fallen bodies. "Who did this?" he asked, but Hiruzen shook his head.
"We don't know.
When we found the bodies, they were already dead. Only a few sounds of fighting were heard by the team guarding the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki," Hiruzen explained.
But Danzu had an even narrower gaze. "Be aware that there were 3 rude ninjas sent to retrieve Hashirama's body, not 2.
One is missing, and I can't find him," Danzu said, with a sharp look, as Hiruzen's eyes widened in surprise at that. Chapter 256, The Rumors About the Strange Movements of the Other Nations.
Third-person POV. Konoha, year 42.
More time passed as strange activities began to be seen on the borders and in other countries. Ninjas began hearing about ninja movements passing through missions in the area, and this made it quite difficult to carry out missions outside the country, as people started to argue that perhaps a new war was emerging. There was no way to hide information from ninjas on common missions outside the Land of Fire, and even merchants coming from abroad or returning from business trips noticed something was happening, and the villages were concentrating their forces in some way. People began to question what was going on, afraid of a new war, as everything pointed to it. Strangely, missions at the borders and in other countries started to decrease, though they were not entirely eradicated, as this would limit the Hokage's access to information about what was happening, even as the murmurs diminished a bit. Questions started to be raised about this, although they began to be muffled within the village.
Still, the ninjas who spoke with outsiders were wary. Minato was standing atop Hashirama's head at that moment, as he always did when he was on the Kage wall.
Since his head had not yet been sculpted there, he had to use the first Hokage's, who, despite many failures in his administration and era, still had fewer than the next 2. He was looking out at the village, feeling the entire place through the observation haki.
Something's going on.
I swear, some Sand Village ninjas were on the East Coast.
Really? They're plotting something. I told the Hokage, but he asked to wait until the investigation is finished. This is very strange, I'm telling you. You guys really doubt the village? The Hokage already said he's investigating. Yes, you should trust the village's leadership. The elders clearly have everything under control. Trust in Danzo-sama, he's the Hokage's right hand. These were a group of off-duty ninjas, talking in a group of 3, questioning what was going on, when 4 ninjas appeared, all approaching them as if they had been listening to the conversation and quickly started giving arguments to calm the questions. The questioning was being muffled by root agents disguised as undercover ninjas, who were circulating the village looking for people raising doubts, a way to control public opinion. Obviously, it made no sense that all this was happening in the 4 enemy nations of Konoha while the ninjas were clearly noticing something very wrong. Danzo and Hiruzen were trying to control as much of it as possible, and there were also the civilians. I'm hearing strange things. They're saying the peace treaty might fall apart. You can't be serious, are you saying we're going back to war? 2 women were talking while shopping at one of the grocery stores. My uncle's son's father is a ninja and said the Cloud Village is concentrating its soldiers. My son explained that his friend's dad said that only happens when an attack is about to happen. It can't be. That's a lie, another person appeared. We are at peace, Konoha won't go to war again. Don't believe in that nonsense, the person replied with hostility while walking past the 2 women shopping. Even in the civilian area, the other elders like Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Utatane were placing civilian agents to control public opinion as well. Minato stood there, able to hear everything happening in the village thanks to his haki after years of training. He could know what each person was doing, the words exchanged, even details like what they were buying or eating. He could even sense marks on their tongues. Minato could feel it all without needing to move. If he focused, he could even see people's emotions. The observation haki was a terrifying ability, and there was the result of it, allowing him to watch over the village better than anyone else could, no matter their sensory skills or even their dojutsu. Either way, Minato remained there, watching how the village was behaving. Everywhere, there were ninjas and civilians talking about it, most of them being silenced by the elders' agents. They didn't want to announce to the village that the Uzumaki clan was being targeted by 4 villages, building a massive military force to destroy them. That would bring a certain negative perception toward the leaders, so they would leave it for the last moment. Minato imagined that truly announcing what was happening at the last minute would leave people torn between trying to save a clan already facing an attack at its doorstep when they weren't even prepared, or trying to save them at the cost of another war. The first mistake of the Hokage would be that, if the 4 villages turned on them, they would be in a very bad situation, unprepared for war. After all, when the Second Great Ninja War began, it was a sudden attack with no great preparation. Now they could strike with a large force, and the Hokage would put the village in danger if the enemy ninjas suddenly turned on them. The second mistake was that the Hokage didn't seem to consider that weakening Konoha's allied forces would only encourage the other 4 nations to attack the Land of Fire even more. Nothing would stop the world from entering a third Great Ninja War. Minato would try to change Konoha, try to corner the Hokage, and if that wasn't enough, he would save the Uzumakis himself. He was still doing missions in the west and couldn't really see what was happening on that side of the country, while every day, when he returned to Konoha, Minato came here to check on the village. It had been 3 weeks since it all began, and soon the time would come for them to act. Minato vanished in the next moment, leaving the place alone, as a few Root Ambu ninjas appeared shortly afterward. He disappeared, let's find him. They murmured as they left, having been trailing Minato the whole time. Not that he didn't already know, but it didn't matter now. Minato headed to the Senju clan, where no one would bother him. There was no one in the Senju clan, as Tsuna and Nawaki were with Tsunade with the purpose of restoring her younger brother's arm. At the same time, security here had increased greatly, at least doubling the number of ninjas watching over Kushina. Certainly after the attempted theft, the Senjus. Now that Nawaki had returned to the village, made sure to make it public, while everyone knew the first Hokage's tomb was being violated by ninjas whom the Hokage declared were from outside the village. He walked calmly past the ninjas, while Kushina, already sensing Minato's presence, went to greet him at the door. Minato entered soon after and moved to the main room, with Kushina forming a barrier of adamant and chains. "How are things?" he asked. Kushina was more isolated than ever, with only her there in the clan. "A bit lonely," she admitted with a sad smile. "The fox is bothering you, isn't it?" Minato asked. Kushina just nodded, answering carefully. "Let's eat something, it's finally time to calm her down," Minato said, receiving yet another killing intent from the creature. "Are you sure?" "She's scary," Kushina murmured. "I have my methods," Minato said. "All right, let's eat," she replied. They ended up eating there. It was noon, and she had something prepared and shared it with Minato, since he had told her in advance that he would eat with her. "How are things?" she asked carefully. "The village is realizing something's wrong, but the elders are doing everything they can to suppress it. They're going to try to stall everyone until the very last moment, when there's no other choice but to watch the Uzumaki clan be destroyed. Also, the surveillance on me has increased a lot, that's why I'm walking alone without Makoto or Hanabi," Minato commented. The mention of the Uzumaki clan made Kushina look at him with a desperate gaze to save them. "Don't worry, we're going to save them," Minato said, and Kushina nodded. "Thank you. I don't want my mother to die. I wanted to see her again," Kushina said. Kushina came from the Uzumaki clan when she was just a girl of 7 or 8 years old. When she and Minato met at the academy, her father had already died when she was a child. She wasn't from a high-ranking family within the clan, yet she had been trained from her earliest years to succeed Mito. It was a great honor for her to be sent to Konoha in the future, something that happened more than 10 years ago. Kushina wanted to see her mother again, it was her wish, but she could never do that being the Jinchuriki. The Uzumaki were also rare visitors to Konoha, and after the war, when that might have been possible, Konoha shut itself off from their clan, distancing itself after offering their heads to the other 4 nations. They talked a little longer, and Minato looked at her seriously. "It's time to go." "Are you ready?" he asked, and she nodded. "Yes," she said, as both of them prepared, performing shadow clone jutsus and disappearing at the same time, leaving the clone in their place to fool the ninjas watching over the Jinchuriki. Minato went to the southern beach while Kushina immediately smiled brightly, able to see that beautiful place again. "I'll gather some natural energy before we go further. I don't want any Ninetales chakra here, it would definitely raise questions," he said as he sat in the lotus position. Kushina immediately began playing in the water, feeling the sea on her feet after taking off her sandals, enjoying the sun and the sea breeze. Minato opened his eyes quickly, now with toad eyes. He needed the chakra to travel as far as he intended. "Your eyes, toad eyes." Kushina laughed at that, while Minato simply shrugged. "Let's go," he said, touching her as they vanished. Minato appeared at Mount Mayaboku, while the strange atmosphere filled with the sounds of frogs surrounded them, and Kushina looked around in surprise. "So this is the land of the toads." "It's amazing," she said cheerfully, and he nodded. "Now let's choose a secluded place to begin," Minato said, while Kushina nodded, despite wanting to explore that place. Minato stopped just as he was about to move, seeing Fukasaku approaching him. He must have sensed his presence the moment he reappeared with Raijin, although Minato admitted he was pretty quick there. "Minato boy," he appeared, jumping before landing on top of a rock. "Hello," Minato greeted him. "What are you doing here? You didn't give notice, did you?" "And who is the young lady beside you?" he asked curiously. "I'm Kushina Uzumaki," she stepped forward and said cheerfully, looking at the small, elderly-looking, talkative toad with curiosity and awe. "This is the chief of the toads, Lord Fukasaku," Minato introduced as he turned back to him. "Sir, I was going to talk to you later anyway. Kushina is the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi, so we came here to have a quick conversation with the Kyubi. We'll be brief and I'll return soon. Now I'm going to take her away for a moment," Minato said as he grabbed Kushina and jumped, moving away. "The Jinchuriki of the Kyubi." "What?" Fukasaku exclaimed, almost fainting upon hearing that. "I promise I'll explain later, we'll be back soon. Goodbye. Minato shouted as he moved away, leaving the toad there, stunned and confused. Chapter 257, The Hatred of the Nine-Tailed Fox's Chakra. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. I want you to focus on your subconscious, Minato said while Kushina nodded, looking around with curiosity. They were at a waterfall a bit away from the Toad's lands. Although this place was still part of their territory, it was much less populated, while Minato's clones were around the area finishing the barrier to protect the place from the fox's chakra. Now with everything ready, Kushina seemed to prepare herself, as she closed her eyes in lotus position in front of Minato. She moved her arms and took Minato's hands, squeezing them with an affectionate touch, and squeezed as Kushina opened a smile. Minato nodded with a smile and waited for Kushina to finally access the most protected part of her subconscious. Kushina felt the whole world disappear in that moment, as she saw herself in the middle of darkness. She soon found herself in a place full of flowers, like a field crowded with them. She was barefoot as she touched the earth, but the scent made her look with a sparkle in her eyes at that field. This was the mental image of her mind, a place she herself had built, as she kept walking through the place. There was a road cutting through the middle of the field as she followed it to its end, knowing she had to go there to reach what she desired. Minato? Kushina murmured, looking back, searching for him, since he said he would be there with her. But the place was empty, there was no one on the road she had walked. Either way, she looked ahead and kept going down the path as she finally saw the end of the flower field, with a huge stone wall, while below it, the path led to a cave. She looked at the entrance, while she could only see darkness, but there was breathing there, with a sinister feeling. It was the place where the nine-tailed fox was kept. She looked once more at the road in the middle of the flower field, but there was no one. Even so, she knew she had to go there, and she went toward the cave. She entered it while Kushina seemed like just an ant, and as she took her first steps, a gust of wind came with a titanic growl, almost pushing her back, as her hair was blown back along with her clothes, with her raising her hand to shield her face. Kushina swallowed hard, as for the first time, she seemed hesitant to continue. I am with you. It was at that moment that she heard Minato's voice echo through her subconscious. Minato. She murmured as she nodded, confident this time, and stepped forward, entering the darkness of the cave. She moved on, and a yellow light appeared above her shoulder, illuminating the place, knowing that that light was Minato helping her follow the path. She felt more confident not being alone. The place began to narrow and she was in front of an open door between torches. She moved forward as she entered a dark area that not even the yellow orb of light could illuminate, but the place was immense. Kushina moved forward until she saw the bars in the distance and walked carefully toward them, and after 10 minutes walking, she was finally in front of them. She couldn't even see the end of the bars nor the space of that place. It seemed endless, as she touched the very darkness beneath her feet, but it was solid. Kushina analyzed the bars in front of her, with the symbol in the middle of it, protecting the gate's opening. She knew it was the seal the village had placed on her, with Mito herself having helped make it before preparing the Biju's host change. You are here. The voice came from the darkness as the fox's two enormous eyes began to manifest to Kushina at that moment. Kushina took a step back by instinct, quickly remembering she needed to fight the fox as she looked at the yellow orb on her shoulder. Nine-tailed fox! Kushina exclaimed, gaining some courage. You know. I feel insulted when someone just comes here thinking they can master my powers, thinking I don't know what you and that boyfriend of yours are planning. It said as red chakra was released throughout the place, even catching Kushina by surprise as the chakra began directing itself toward her. It started to climb up her legs and began to manifest like a cloak wrapping around her body. This? Kushina could do nothing to stop it, as the glow from the orb of light grew stronger, trying to repel the red chakra. Do you really think you can control my power, Kushina? Look at you, I feel the fear inside you, I feel your anger. You can't control this chakra, this power of mine. The QB seemed to be enjoying itself, watching Kushina trying to pull away from the chakra, as her eyes started turning red, like the fox's. You are a caged bird. You are just a tool for the village, you are only meant to fulfill your role, to die for the village. Countless voices began to flood Kushina's mind suddenly, with the QB mocking her, feeding her the evil chakra so that the fool would truly believe she could handle its strength.
It wouldn't even let Kushina challenge it, it would give her the power she came to seek, turning it against the redhead herself. Minato's light began to fade, with Kushina feeling her mind invaded by negative thoughts, until it went completely dark.
Minato.
She murmured his name like a cry of despair as she continued to be overwhelmed by dark thoughts. In the real world, Kushina began to erupt in red chakra, creating her cloak with 3 tails appearing at once, while Minato stood there in front of her, hands connected and eyes closed. He moved his face in a slightly frustrated expression, but remained there, hands holding Kushina's hands surrounded by red chakra.
The clones looked at the scene with concern while holding firm to prevent the fox's chakra from escaping that place. Minato? Kushina screamed in the middle of the darkness. She found herself in the next moment, searching for him. Hokage? A woman Hokage?
Suddenly she saw herself as a little girl on the first day of the academy, just after she had shouted that she would become Hokage, wanting respect from her new classmates in such a strange village she had arrived at just a few days ago. Look at her hair, what a weird color, this weirdo joined the elite class. What kind of joke is this? Another student shouted, mocking her. Kushina got angry, as her gaze went to the last rows, hoping to be defended as she had been on the first day.
Look at this weird thing.
Suna, who had accompanied her during her first days introducing her to Konoha, since she would be staying with the Senju clan, began to speak against her aloud, which caught Kushina by surprise. Makoto only looked at her with disdain, without a word, but seeing Minato looking at her with a certain disgust made her swallow hard.
Who does she think she is? You should leave the village and go back to where you came from, Minato said with indifference, catching Kushina off guard. No, you're not Minato, she murmured.
Minato looked at her still with disgust, just like the entire classroom.
Get out of here. Go away, stranger. This is not the place you should be.
This started to throw Kushina into panic, as she couldn't stand the stares. Even the teacher looked at her with disgust. She gave one last look at the young Minato and ran out of the classroom. She ran through the academy corridors and out the main entrance, leaving the academy and entering the village, tears falling from her eyes, passing through the crowded streets, while she didn't yet have the ninja skills she would acquire over the next 10 years, causing her to bump into a man in front of a shop as she looked up. The man looked at her with hatred, and Kushina saw everyone in the street looking at her.
Monster!
One of them said, catching Kushina by surprise, as she felt something behind her. Her shadow had changed, it no longer had a human shape, but was now connected to her with one of the tails of the 9-tailed fox as it growled.
Monster! You should leave, freak! The 9-tailed fox, it could kill us all. Leave the village, you curse!
They started to verbally treat Kushina like trash, while the girl began to feel her emotions growing increasingly negative, unable to control it. She didn't think twice before running again, dashing through the streets of Konoha as everyone watched her on the path to the Senju clan, desperately with tears falling even more than before, the figure of the fox still behind her.
Monster! 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 Monster!
People called her a monster repeatedly, men, women, and children, all there, seeing her as a plague.
She finally saw the gate of the Senju clan and ran quickly toward it.
Someone stood in front of it, and her eyes widened as she saw Minato there. Monster, he said with a malicious smile. Kushina's heart tightened even more as she passed him, tears falling to the ground. She entered the clan grounds, seeing emptiness, and tried to find Mito, who should be alive at this moment, hoping she would take her out of that place. She saw her shadow standing on top of the tower that had once taken her up.
Kushina ran quickly there, climbing the spiral stairs, heading to the rooftop.
She finally reached the rooftop and saw Mito with her back turned, looking at the statues of the Hokage.
Mito-sama! Kushina exclaimed through tears as Mito turned to her.
Kushina, she seemed to raise an eyebrow in concern, different from all the others, while Kushina had a look of relief as Mito wasn't like everyone else.
Mito! Is it really you? She murmured as the woman looked surprised.
Of course it's me, silly girl.
What's going on?
She approached Kushina, who immediately ran into her arms, the elderly woman holding her.
It's okay, Mito murmured. Mito! I'm scared, this place isn't real. Minato isn't real, she said in despair. It's going to be alright, Kushina, once you disappear for good. Mito's voice changed, and Kushina took a frightened step back. She saw the woman who had treated her like a daughter smiling in a bizarre way, seeing that even Mito seemed to hate her. You are a monster, Kushina, Mito said. No. You're not real. Minato's not real either. This is all from the Kyuubi. Kushina screamed, trying to back away. Even if it weren't real, the Minato you know is just using you, Kushina. He only wants the power of the Kyuubi in his hands and won't hesitate to sacrifice you for it. Mito said. Lies. Kushina screamed. Isn't it true? Can't you see the obvious, monster? Someone else appeared on the rooftop. It was the young Minato himself. You're not real, Kushina exclaimed. Come on, Kushina. Give me the Kyuubi's power and die, Minato said, opening a smile. No, she murmured through tears. Outside of that vision, still within Kushina's consciousness, she was inside the cage, floating above the fox's hands while pure red chakra surrounded her like a cocoon. Destroy everything. End this suffering, the Kyuubi said as it closed its hands. On the outside, in the real world, Kushina burst into chakra as her skin began to tear, making all the clones frown, while the chakra spread even to the original body. Light-like lines appeared across his body, seeming to hurt him, while his intangibility activated, healing the damage. Even so, Minato remained there, standing in the same place. Stop, 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 Kushina murmured in her vision. Monster, monster, monster. Mito and Minato kept repeating those words on that rooftop, with Kushina in a corner of it, curled up around her knees, crying without pause. Please, stop, she screamed in despair. Kushina. Then a voice that wasn't filled with hate came. It was Minato's voice, and her eyes immediately searched for him in desperation, with Mito and Minato still in front of her, now looking up at the sky in surprise. Suddenly, the sky began to crack. Beams of light started shooting out from the openings, multiple rays of light fired downward, heading for the village. Kushina was surprised as the first beam struck the village, exploding everything they touched. The rays didn't stop, as every place was destroyed in balls of yellow light. The entire village exploded, and Kushina watched as the Hokage rock began to shatter next, breaking everything. Her eyes widened as the rays moved toward the tower where she stood. The entire Senju estate began to be destroyed, and the rays struck the tower as well, with Mito and Minato there, screaming in shock. Kushina also expected the worst for a moment, but there was no pain. The beam enveloped her in a warmth with a feeling of tenderness, and she felt all the fear and despair she had before disappear. The entire village exploded, as yellow light took over the whole place. There was no more darkness, everything became yellow. Kushina. An elderly voice called her, and she immediately looked ahead, seeing none other than Mito, smiling at her with closed lips. Mito, is it really you? Kushina murmured, tears falling. Of course, now you're safe, silly girl, Mito said, and Kushina immediately knew it was the real one and ran into her arms the next moment. Chapter 258, I'm so happy. Third person POV. Konoha, year 42. Outside, even Fukasaku appeared stunned, heading toward the barrier upon seeing the Kyuubi's glow from afar as he arrived at the barrier created by Minato, staring in shock at the partial transformation of the redhead while a Minato stood in front of her with closed eyes. He immediately thought she was losing control, and being so close to Mount Myaboku, it was a danger to all of them, thinking Minato had brought a great threat. Minato's clones were at the side, continuing to maintain the barrier, waiting for Kushina to return to normal. Hey, Minato boy. You have to do something before the fox is released, he said from behind the barrier, while the clone frowned. On the separate side of Kushina's consciousness. She held Mito tightly as tears streamed from her eyes onto Mito's clothes. Mito stood there in silence, hugging her with one hand, pulling Kushina close. She simply let the girl cry there while trying to calm her down. Is it really you? Kushina murmured. Of course it is. Girl, I'm here to help you. I saw everything you went through. I'm so sorry.
It was all a lie, made by that stinking fox's hatred-filled chakra, Mito said.
How is it possible? You're not. Kushina felt Mito's chakra and truly knew it was her.
She was no longer the academy girl without all the abilities like in the vision where the village judged her. So she could feel she was in front of Mito.
This is my chakra that was placed in you when they transferred the Kyuubi into your body.
I took the opportunity to leave a little of my energy, while my real self is resting in the other world with Hashirama, or so I hope, Mito said.
I'm happy to see you again. Kushina held on even tighter. Me too, my girl. Mito said.
They stayed there for a while, the space all golden and no longer seeming to change.
Kushina looked up at Mito. You know what's going on then? I mean, with our clan? She asked. Yes. Mito nodded.
I'm very sad that the village is following this path.
She also didn't want the land where she was born before coming to Konoha to be destroyed. If I were alive,
I swear I would have beaten up every one of those old men. How could they abandon the Uzumaki, give them up in exchange for a false peace and weaken Konoha with it?
Hashirama would never have agreed to such a thing, she said, dissatisfied. Thank you for saving me. I was so scared. Kushina spoke again of her vision and despair, more than anything else she had ever felt. It wasn't really me who saved you. Mito said.
I didn't have much of my power left for that, but that boy did it, she said.
Minato. He's here? Kushina pulled back, looking behind, but there was nothing but gold surrounding them. He'll come soon. I asked him to have a little talk with you first. Mito said as Kushina turned her attention back to her. I wanted to say that I'm proud of you, Kushina. Mito continued as Kushina remained silent, opening her eyes upon hearing that. You're not being treated any better by the village than I was, I'm sorry for that, but you're still getting stronger and stronger. I see your efforts to help your friends all the time. She smiled at the young Uzumaki. And you have very loyal friends. And that's why the Kyuubi never reached you before and never went berserk in the village unless heavily provoked and its rage exploded. Your seal is still very strong because your emotions are filled by all those around you. Kushina nodded slightly as Mito continued. Besides that, that boy is amazing, he's doing something that even goes against the village's decision. But at the same time, he's fighting for what's right and is even being guided by the ideals Hashirama had to create a village where people could protect one another. I love the village, don't get me wrong about that, but I'm on Minato's side here. And if he has to leave the village, you must go with him. Mito said. Yes. I will go with him, and we will save the Uzumaki clan. Kushina replied. I'm sure you will, Kushina. You will surpass me. You're a vessel, like I once told you, more than just a shell for the fox, you are someone who is loved and has people who care about you. You have everything you need to control this power. You will surpass me. She murmured. Kushina opened her eyes as she saw Mito becoming transparent. Mito simply smiled. My time is up and my chakra is fading. Myself from the other world will soon receive these memories. I'll tell her about how the girl who took my place became a powerful kunoichi and that even I was left behind. I'll also tell her that in this world full of wars and chaos, there are still people like Minato, fighting for their ideals, even if it means going against everyone around him. She spoke as her body began to float and vanish into particles. Mito. Kushina murmured, watching her disappear. Goodbye, Kushina. Now I'll leave her with you. Please, take care of her, just like you took care of my other granddaughter, Suna. Mito said, looking toward the light and closing her eyes as her body completely vanished. Mito. Kushina cried out to her one last time, watching the last part of her body turn to particles, leaving only her smile behind. At the same time, a light appeared behind Kushina, and Minato appeared a moment later. Kushina turned upon noticing him, her face full of tears. Minato was looking at the place where Mito had disappeared, deep in his own thoughts.
They had spoken while Kushina was trapped in the hell created by the fox's chakra, with him desperately trying to reach her. They had a brief conversation before Mito went to see Kushina one last time. Minato was content to have had that talk. After all, Mito had died during the war, and it was good to see her again.
Kushina didn't waste time and ran to Minato, hugging him tightly. "Now it's you." "Mito, she murmured. "I know, it's okay now." "Kushina." Minato returned the embrace.
"I don't know if I can control this power." She hadn't wanted to say that to Mito, so as not to disappoint her, but Kushina was scared, afraid of being in that place where everyone judged her.
"I'm with you now, Kushina. Everything will be okay from now on. I believe you can do this, I'm with you, so we'll do this together," Minato said with a soft and confident tone. "You think so?"
she murmured, looking at him. "Yes, we'll do this together," he said, gently pulling her away for a moment. "Listen, Kushina, here's what we're going to do," he began as she listened. The Kyuubi still had its hands on the cocoon around Kushina, squeezing it, while smiling to show what she would go through trying to control its chakra, crushing the girl's arrogance. "Let the hatred flow, you cannot control this power, Kushina," the fox said with a malicious tone. "I'm so happy." A voice suddenly echoed, as the Kyuubi lifted its eyes in surprise to see Kushina within its grasp. "What's happening?" it was shocked, looking up. "Did he do something?" The Kyuubi knew that Minato was still connected with Kushina, even after she had pushed him away. "I'm coming. You need to eat properly, Databane." "I'm not hungry, I'm going to the academy, Mom." "Naruto?" "I have to get stronger as fast as possible, I'll be Hokage like Dad, Databeo." Kushina stood with dazed eyes beside Minato, as he created a kind of illusion formed by light, manipulating it to give her a vision he imagined of the future. In front of them, they saw a house with Kushina cooking omelets while Minato sat at the table reading a scroll, both older than they were now. Everything seemed normal until a blond boy appeared, running from his room with his backpack in hand, grabbing an already made egg sandwich and putting it in his mouth before running to the window, shouting that he was going to the academy. The older Kushina looked furious at this, her hair coming alive with anger, wanting Naruto, as she called him, to stay and eat, but the boy just jumped out the window as older Minato sighed. "Minato! How could you let him leave like that? Let him go. He wants to train his new jutsu." The real Kushina looked at the scene, clutching the area of her heart with her hand, seeing her family beside Minato and having a son named Naruto. While Minato continued manipulating the light, creating real illusions, not mental ones to confuse the mind, but physical light effects, he only needed to shape them and change their color. Light could manipulate anything he wanted, it was an ability he was developing, though it wasn't yet good enough for battle. Still, he wanted to show it to Kushina. This wasn't the future, just a way to show what Minato envisioned. He didn't know if they'd only have Naruto, or if the house would be bigger, but he made it simple for Kushina, showing just her. "I'm so happy," Kushina murmured. Minato knew that for her to control the fox's chakra, her heart needed to be pure, just like Naruto's had to be when he took the trial to master that power. "I'm so happy," she continued as Minato nodded, taking her hand. "It's time," he said as Kushina nodded back, giving him a beautiful smile. The Kyuubi was still surprised, hearing Kushina's voice echoing through the space until something happened. Suddenly, Kushina began to break the cocoon, yellow light shining from her, pouring out from between the Kyuubi's clenched hands. "How is this possible?" the fox growled, trying to squeeze harder, but more and more light burst from between its fingers until Kushina vanished with the sound of the Raijin being activated. The fox clenched its hands even tighter, only to realize Kushina was no longer there, having been teleported away as a brilliant light flared above the beast's head. It didn't even have time to process what happened to Kushina before its eyes turned toward the massive Udama Rasengan, the size of a house, barreling toward it, Minato now inside the cage, charging the fox with the attack. Outside Kushina's mind, her transformation began to fade, returning her to normal, surprising and especially relieving everyone, as only Kushina and Minato remained with their eyes closed beside each other. Minato was recovering from the damage, his body covered in cuts sealed by light.
Kushina had returned to normal after everything, but now it was someone else who was fighting the fox. Minato approached the beast, finally launching his enormous Rasengan at it. "Now I'm your opponent, Kurama!" Minato shouted, striking her face the very next second. Chapter 259 Kurama. Third-person POV. Mental landscape inside Kushina, year 42.
Minato struck the Kyuubi's head with force, and she could only brace for the attack, her face crunching with a furious snarl as she felt the impact. "Rrrr," the Kyuubi growled, as her body leaned into the giant Rasengan, with Minato holding it against her and pushing her back even more. The Kyuubi was hating the boy for attacking her like that, as she found herself losing, her body being thrown backward. But there was also something that surprised her. He had called her by her true name, which should have been impossible, leaving her confused with a mix of anger, frustration, and disbelief. No one should know her name besides the one who named her or her own siblings, the other 8 Bijus. The entire place generated a vortex of wind with the Super Rasengan, with Minato continuing to push the Kyuubi with the ball of energy larger than his own head. Then he exploded his Rasengan, with the Kyuubi being launched backward by the force of the attack, flying hundreds of meters, as the entire place shook with the impact. The Kyuubi finally hit the ground, being dragged for a few more meters before turning her gaze back to Minato, more than 300 meters away, enraged that a human had struck her like that. "How do you?" The Kyuubi murmured in a tone of anger, wanting to demand how it was possible for Minato to know her name. However, Minato didn't seem to care about those questions and didn't even let the fox finish speaking, as his eyes shifted into Sage mode, with 2 clones appearing in the air on either side of him. They opened their hands, and Rasengans began to form, growing until they became Rasen Shuriken with the addition of wind element. Becoming powerful spirals in each of the airborne clones, they quickly leaned with their arms before thrusting them forward, sending the 3 Rasen Shuriken flying forward with a thunderous and slicing sound, the 3 lights speeding toward the surprised Kyuubi. Each of them advanced directly at the Kyuubi, who could do nothing but watch the 3 energies approach. When they got close, she couldn't even jump away as she intended. All the energies exploded around her, as she was covered in light the next moment, snarling even more in rage, now with evident pain. Once again, she flew through the darkness of Kushina's mental space, until she stopped at a distance once again, angry and growling directly at Minato. "Damn human!" Kyuubi exclaimed, lifting her face to the sky with her roar being heard throughout the place. She didn't even want to understand anymore how he knew her name. With her mouth open, she began to form a sphere, gathering her chakra for a Bijudama to fire directly at Minato, the chakra growing more and more, increasing until it reached a gigantic size, much larger than what Minato had seen from the Two-Tails blast. The blonde looked at it with a calm gaze, even with the fox 500 meters away in the darkness, his body glowed and he charged straight at her. The Kyuubi couldn't even complete the attack when a light appeared beneath her chin in an instant, as Minato appeared there using the speed of light, clenching his fist with armament haki and striking the fox directly under the mouth. The impact immediately forced her head back as she snarled, surprised to feel the blow, realizing that it had truly hurt her more than any other strike so far. "How is this possible?" Kurama murmured, dazed. Meanwhile, Minato watched, noticing that the armament haki was hurting the Bijou even more than his previous attacks. However, the massive Bijudama nearby, close to them while Minato held the upper hand with the Kyuubi falling backward, began to collapse at that moment, sending winds in all directions, as Kurama was no longer maintaining its stable state after building it up to fire. It quickly began to change, growing unstable, expanding out of control as it started to glow. In the next moment, the Bijudama exploded with both of them still there. The enormous explosion burst forth, lighting everything up, devastating whatever it could with a blast that even passed through the gate and reached all sides. Kurama was swallowed within the explosion, along with Minato. The impact made everything shake violently. The explosion lasted over 30 seconds before finally starting to fade. Everything returned to normal after more than a minute of tremors, as Kurama appeared with clenched teeth, growling, her entire body blackened, burning from her own Bijudama. She immediately tried once again to search for the human to see if he had survived. Even though this was a mental projection, he couldn't have truly died from that, but the psychological damage would be terrible for the real body if he did die here. Still,
that human had already proven to her that he was slippery. Then, from the darkness, a light appeared in the sky. The fox looked up, surprised, as rays of light began to emerge at that moment, firing down like a rain of flashing beams. There was no way for Kurama to dodge it. The attack was being launched across the entire area. Immediately, explosions began erupting as the rain reached Kurama and the ground. Kurama was having no easy time, being caught in multiple explosions constantly since Minato decided to attack her, and even by her own energy. She was even more wounded from that impact, when suddenly, he appeared beside her face. Minato appeared, striking her again with armament haki on his blackened fist, hitting the side of her face. She didn't go flying, but still fell back, feeling tremendous pain from that black fist. How can he hurt me like this? What is that? Kurama didn't understand, frustrated. Those punches from Minato were worse than the attacks before. Quickly, she lunged to grab Minato before falling back, trying to bite him, but he dispersed into light and pulled away, reappearing at a distance while floating in the air, looking at the fox. "You damn human! How are you doing this?" she growled at him. "Now you want to talk?" Minato said, while Kurama grew even angrier, since he had been attacking her non-stop and now wanted to talk. "Don't you think it's fair? This is for what you did to Kushina, and what you put her through." Minato spoke with a hint of anger, even though he knew the one who created that nightmare for Kushina was the fox's own chakra. She had put her in that situation without even trying to talk to her. And without warning, as Kurama's body tried to turn toward Minato again, chains began to rise from the ground, before Kurama could respond or react. Minato watched, seeing that Kushina had finally decided to act. The chains quickly began to wrap around the Kyuubi, circling her before tightening, forcing her to compress. Kurama looked on in fury, trying to break free. "Kushina!" Kurama exclaimed angrily. "Very good," Minato commented calmly, before transforming his body into light and moving toward the restrained Kurama, landing on her forehead. "Let's have a chat, Kurama. I've always wanted to meet you. Now, although I still want to beat you up for what you put my wife through," Minato said calmly, while the fox's red eyes stared at him with bloodlust. "How do you know my name?" "Who told you?" She thought some of the bijus had told him, since, being used in the war, they might have crossed paths with Minato, as he had mentioned encounters with 4 different bijus, and one of them could have told him. That would make Kurama extremely angry. Whichever of her siblings had done it would pay. "I know a lot about you and all the other bijus. In the beginning, after Hagoromo split the chakra of the 10 tails into 9 parts, you were one of them." "How do you know that?" Kurama couldn't help but give a surprised look. "I know about everything. I know about Hagoromo and what happened here 1,000 years ago. I'm not your enemy. In fact, I want to ask for your help because I believe we can help each other. After all, what is about to happen in the future will put you back in the Geta statue, and the 10 tails will be revived to create a jutsu that Kagaya used in the past, placing everyone in the world inside the tree to gather all chakra. At the same time, it will be used to resurrect her." "That can't be possible," Kurama murmured, not fully believing, though doubt was evident in her tone. "Why wouldn't it be? Someone has already awakened the Rinnegan. And someone you know well. Madara Uchiha. Since he must be a lovely Uchiha to you," Minato said. Kurama immediately growled, remembering the person she hated even more than Madara, coming just after him, Hashirama himself, for having imprisoned her. "I'm telling you that Madara evolved the same eyes as Hagoromo. He has already taken the Geta statue down from the moon, where it was sealed, and it's already here on Earth. He'll begin collecting the bijus in about 2 decades. It can't be." Kurama was speechless. She understood very well what Minato was talking about, even though she hadn't heard everything from her father. He knew the story, he knew the details. "Do you understand the danger this world is in, with Uchiha Madara having and planning to resurrect the 10 tails, with you and all your 8 siblings vanishing from existence to once again become the 10 tails?" Kurama stayed silent, staring at Minato. Even Kushina was appearing at that moment below the Kyuubi, her chains binding the beast,
as she looked on in surprise with Minato speaking to Kurama. His voice echoed through the entire place, and she didn't understand what Minato was saying to the fox, calling her Kurama, since he had never told her, knowing the fox would get very agitated hearing that from an outsider.
"What do you want then?" Kurama finally murmured. "What I want is very simple. I want you to stop bothering Kushina.
And I want you to lend her your power as well," Minato requested. "Why should I give my power to you humans?" she roared, angry again. "Because there's no way for you to leave her body like this. Tell me, how long do you think you'll last? Besides, with the danger of becoming the 10 Tails Bijou again, you're going to need our help.
Just as we want to help you and your siblings.
A Bijou is more powerful fighting alongside its Jinchuriki,"
Minato said.
"You're not the one our father said would come to help us."
"I don't believe you."
Kurama growled once more, and Minato ended up giving a small smile.
"No, I'm not. And neither is Kushina. Actually, it's our son.
He's the one the Sage of Six Paths spoke of when he separated all of you.
My son will be the one to guide you down the right path."
That seemed to leave Kurama speechless, still bound there.
"You certainly still have a lot to ask. And we can stay a while and talk."
"After all, I'm sure we won't have many chances to speak with each other," he said, and Minato simply sat there, on her head.
Kurama seemed uncertain, for the first time replacing the hatred she felt for that human. Until she spoke again, wanting to understand what Minato knew. Chapter 260, Kurama's Chakra, the Semi-Perfect Jinchuriki. Third-person POV. Mental landscape inside Kushina, year 42. Still in Kushina's mind, a silence had settled inside Kurama's cage.
While Minato stood beside Kushina, the ground stared at Kurama, who had stood up again.
No one said anything else.
The place was completely silent.
Kurama looked at Minato, but not with all the hatred from before.
There was only curiosity and even caution after the conversation they had. Meanwhile, Kushina, although still watching Kurama cautiously, was impressed with what Minato had discussed with the fox, since she never imagined such things existed in this world.
The story Minato told was unlike anything she had ever heard.
At the same time, it seemed so real, as if there were a great lie surrounding the entire past of this world, while Minato and the fox herself spoke of it with a certain calmness.
Minato answered Kurama's questions as best he could, acknowledging that he didn't know everything, but he did know a large part of the future.
At the same time, he also acknowledged Kurama, her siblings, and the one who created them, as Kyubi wanted to test him. Kushina herself wanted to ask many questions, but she didn't want to interrupt the conversation Minato was having with the fox.
"Then, what do you say?" Minato then broke the silence, as his voice echoed through the empty space. Kurama took a few seconds before turning her gaze to Kushina, who became a little more cautious. "Do you think she'll really be able to control my chakra?" Kurama asked. "I believe so.
I'll be helping her with that, and she won't have to go through that thing you made her go through anymore." He spoke, still with disgust.
"And you need my power to save the Uzumaki clan?" Kurama asked again, though grumpy, without that hatred anymore.
"Yes. She will need your strength and your help.
I want you two to fight together.
If we all want to survive, your powers are even greater with a Jinchuriki.
I want you to lend your strength to Kushina. And in the future, fight together," Minato said. Kurama fell silent again.
She clicked her tongue.
"All right.
I'll give her my power," she said at last. Minato seemed to have shaken her quite a bit to make her agree to such a thing, when just a day ago she was filled with deadly hatred and ready to kill Kushina to escape her body. He hadn't expected things to end like this.
Anyway, Minato looked at Kushina. "Go ahead,"
he asked, while she seemed quite cautious. But she nodded in the end, taking a step forward with Kurama being watched carefully. The fox stared at her. "I don't know what the future holds for us, girl, but I'll believe in your boyfriend's words.
We'll be working together. But if you betray me, I won't hesitate to kill you. Do we understand each other?" the fox said with a threatening tone. Kushina almost faltered, but remembered why she was there and didn't even want to look at Minato so as not to disappoint him, while nodding with a firm gaze toward the fox. "All right. Let's work together, Kurama," she murmured, calling her by name for the first time after hearing Minato say it so many times during their conversation. "So be it." The fox clicked her tongue as she began to raise her fist toward Kushina, placing it right in front of the girl. "Touch my fist and you'll be able to take my chakra. Don't make me regret this," Kurama murmured. Kushina nodded, placing her fist against the fox's, looking like just a flea in front of her. In the next moment, she began to feel a large amount of chakra flowing directly into her, surprised, as if it were Kurama's own manifestation starting to grow inside her, made of pure red chakra. "Kushina, you need to store the chakra somewhere else in your mind so you can access it later," Minato said, while Kushina nodded and quickly directed the chakra being transferred to a place where it could be easily used later. Minato stayed silent there and she watched until finally Kurama finished transferring almost all the chakra to her. "I think we're done here. I'm going to sleep," Kurama simply said, pulling her hand back as she tried to move away. "This isn't the end. We'll still find a way to break the seal that keeps you here. That would be good for you too, don't you think?" Minato said, while Kurama looked at him and just nodded, starting to move away again. Kushina approached Minato, a little lost. "Minato," she murmured, looking at her own hands. "Did I do it?" "Yes. You did well. Now you'll be able to access the fox's chakra when we're outside," he said, while Kushina nodded, still feeling the energy inside her. "One more thing," Minato said, looking around the dark space. "Can't you improve this place? It feels kind of sad here," he said, since if this was Kushina's mental space, it could at least be better than a dark cave with no end in sight. "All right. I'll try to improve it," she replied, as they began to leave. Kurama moved away from the two and crouched down, placing her two paws under her chin and was about to sleep, when suddenly everything began to change. She lifted her head as the cave started to transform into a vast sea of flowers, like an extension of the outside where Kushina had been before. The entire place filled with flowers, with small hills and the space above turned into a sunny and beautiful day, with the sun shining brightly, sending strong rays onto the fox as Kurama looked on in surprise. But at the same time, she found all those plants and colorful flowers spread everywhere a bit over the top. She quickly made a face. They could have chosen a forest, not something so ridiculous, Kurama muttered before finally falling asleep. After giving so much chakra to the girl, she needed rest to recover. Minato was already outside and shortly after, Kushina opened her eyes at that moment inside the barrier, outside, blinking several times with her blue eyes before looking at Minato, almost not believing what had happened. "Minato, we did it. I now have the fox's chakra," she murmured, still in disbelief. "Yes, you can finally use that power and we'll start training it a bit before going back to the village," Minato said as he looked at several attentive clones. He also saw Fukasaku waiting outside with considerable concern as he stared at them. Minato looked at the clones and nodded, signaling that everything was fine. After the clones deactivated the barrier and disappeared, the chief toad moved toward Minato. "What was that? I thought the nine-tailed fox was going to show up here," he said in an urgent tone. "Well, we had a few setbacks with her. It wasn't easy, but everything's fine now," Minato said to the toad, while the latter still looked at him suspiciously. "Are you ready, Kushina?" Minato turned to Kushina and asked, while she nodded. "I just have to manifest the chakra, right?" She was quite determined as Minato nodded, while she closed her eyes and quickly accessed a part of her mind. A massive amount of chakra began to rise. She raised her hand and the chakra started to connect to her with a thin thread. In the next moment, Kushina began to glow. Even Fukasaku was surprised by it, jumping back with stunned eyes, while Minato smiled as he saw her turning completely golden, a characteristic of the Ninetails Jinchuriki. When accessing the chakra, it causes a transformation quite different from the usual. This is the power of the nine-tailed fox. Kushina murmured, as she saw herself completely golden, as if she were on fire, with small amounts of chakra coming off her and disappearing into the air. The ground beneath her began to sprout small plants and flowers. The amount of life energy was so great in a chakra filled with so much hatred, which was ironic. What is this? She's controlling the chakra of the nine-tailed fox. Fukasaku murmured, stammering, not quite knowing what that meant. As he felt the power around her, he understood this was the fox's chakra, but in a different form. This could only mean one thing. Congratulations! You've become an almost perfect Jinchuriki, Kushina. We need to develop this power. Minato said, as she looked at him and nodded. Yes. To save the Uzumaki clan, I will master this power, Minato. She said confidently. Minato nodded. Fukasaku didn't know what to think, as he began to see Minato teaching things to Kushina. Which was quite strange, since he wasn't the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, but he seemed to know exactly how the fox's chakra and Kushina's powers worked. Meanwhile, Kushina began to create giant hands as extensions of her body, moving them in all directions as she imagined. She moved toward a rock, clenched her golden fist and threw it forward, manifesting chakra in the giant fist and breaking the rock with ease. Incredible! She murmured. Not just that, but it's time we test your speed, Kushina. Minato said, while she looked at him curiously. One of the potentials of having the Nine-Tails chakra was its extreme speed. So fast it could even rival the Hiraishin, without using any seals. It was incredible. If Kushina mastered that, she herself would be a monster in the ninja world. And few people could oppose her. Minato might be about to face 4 entire villages against the Uzumaki, but he would have a Uchiha companion with the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, a Senju with Sage Mode, and an Uzumaki and Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, controlling her chakra. The weakest in the group would be Hanabi, who would need to at least develop her Tensigen to reach the other's power level. But Minato didn't know how to help her with that. If he had the chance, he would. Now he had to prepare. After all, with Kushina able to master the chakra and undergoing training to control it as much as possible, they were confident they could handle anything together, be it Kagez or other Jinchuriki, with their girls. Kushina trained her speed while Minato observed and helped her. She really struggled. She wasn't very strong when it came to being fast, but she also trained other abilities and significantly increased everything she already had. She could now perform hand seals much faster and even expand her adamantine sealing chains without limit. She could create over 1,000 chains now and form a barrier around the entire Mount Mayaboku. When she tested this new jutsu, the chains quickly surrounded entire kilometers, creating a shield that surprised all the toads. Fukasaku was left speechless, unable to believe what he was seeing as just a golden girl was doing all of this. I think we better go. We've stayed too long already. Minato said in the end, as Kushina nodded, undoing her transformation and returning to normal. She was visibly happy after seeing the entire area destroyed and the barrier dissolving across Mount Mayaboku. In the end, they said goodbye to a frozen Fukasaku, still in shock. Send my regards to Mother Toad. Minato didn't forget to say, and in the next moment, he disappeared with Kushina after recovering his Senju mode chakra to use his Hiraishin jutsu and send them straight back to the village, while 2 clones of Minato and Kushina appeared in their place before exploding moments later. Now, the political war was about to begin in Konoha. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released 1 day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.